Good morning. Welcome to our Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, September 4th, 2019. We're back to our busy schedule again after a bit of a summer break, and welcome to everybody for being with us today. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask if there's any declarations of interest. Seeing none, before I move to community announcements, I have a couple of items I'd like to speak to. First off, I'd like to extend condolences to Councillor Morton on the passing of her brother, Dean Sinclair, on August 22nd. I'd also like to acknowledge the passing of former Councillor Marlene Johnson on August 23rd. Marlene served as a councillor with East Gwillimbury for 30 years, electing to retire in October 2018. On behalf of Council, I extend our heartfelt condolences to Marlene's husband, Alvin, her sons, Bob and Sean, and their families. I wonder if we could all stand now for a moment of silence. Thank you. A more formal tribute to Marlene will be done at our 3 p.m. Meeting today. With that, I would like to move to community announcements. And just looking to see, Councillor Crone, are you prepared to start today? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been a very interesting last few weeks. I will say that one of the standout moments for me this last few weeks was the citizenship ceremony that we all participated in at the Sharon Temple. It was I think it was the first time we've ever done such in East Gwillimbury, and we were honored to have John Ralston Saul with us to preside. And he gave a great lecture on the history of the temple, and I'm certainly better for it. So that was a fabulous event, and I'm sure folks will add other events as well that we were at, but the other one was the North Union Hall had another very successful corn roast, and I think everyone got their fill and had a good time, and if I can just on top of what you said, express condolences to the families of Marlene Johnson and, of course, Councillor Morton on the loss of her brother. Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you. Councillor Roy-DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just looking forward to a few things. Obviously, we've all had a very busy summer, including a very successful visit to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario's conference, as well as the other highlights mentioned earlier today. Just want to look forward to this Friday is the Sharon Temple's annual illumination. Tickets, I think, are still available, but they are going fast. So if you are interested in attending, it's always a beautiful evening with a lovely performance, and the temple always looks absolutely gorgeous when it's lit up for illumination. There's a couple of other community events coming up, including our EG Nature Day. And I know that our Mount Albert Lions are planning an Oktoberfest coming up. So have a look at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Persechini.
Yes, it's good to be back. The citizenship was I want to also say there was a great day, and it's good to see so many newcomers be sworn in. I remember when I got sworn in many moons ago. I was 18. I was never so proud that I had that citizenship card, and it was a great day, and I enjoyed it at the Sharon Temple, and also the opening park of Rickview and Holland Landing. So it's been a busy summer, but it's been a good summer. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too attended the event at the Sharon Temple, and it was amazing to see everyone being sworn in, and actually for those of us that were there being sworn in as well, which was amazing. And my granddaughter was thrilled the fact that she could go home and tell her mother that she was now a citizen of Canada. Out of the mouths of babes. But I attended the North Union barbecue as well, and the 20th anniversary of the Holland Landing Church, and they really, really appreciated the recognition by the town. And it was a lovely service, and I'm glad that I was able to attend. I also attended the 90th anniversary of Rita Bonner. There was a mix-up, so Scott and I are going back to wish your best wishes once again. So we just have to get a date with her. And Art Moody actually turned 95 this week, and I popped in and gave him our best wishes as well. So that's it for me, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just like to echo the sentiments of the citizenship ceremony. That was a great event, and I'm glad to hear that it certainly sounds like there will be more of them in East Gwillimbury. They got a favorable kind of a boost to get that done. August the 18th, I attended the Witness to History event. That would be the anniversary of 200th anniversary, I believe, of the for the Doan family. Also was very interested in touring the burying grounds in Sharon, and I'm sure Councillor Morton might be able to correct me on this one, but they've had that property ultrasounded, did an ultrasound and found, I think they said 50 more graves that aren't marked, some of them outside the fences, so that was interesting. The River Drive Park beef roast on August the 24th was pretty well attended. Mayor Hackson and myself spent a good portion of the afternoon and evening there. That was it was a lot of fun. And I should also mention that September the 7th, which is this Saturday coming, I believe, is the last event for the car show in the parking lot. So it might be a good one to get out to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I, along with all others, members of council, attended the citizenship, and I guess the words that I could use, the entire day for me was moving. So many people who have chosen to live in Canada and not just live here, but to swear their allegiance to the country was really moving. I had a chance to attend the Chamber of Commerce barbecue. As most members of council, we also had Ridgeview Park opening. The Golden Anchor Seniors had a corn roast. I attended that. We had Minor Hockey Association. It's their 60th anniversary, and they had a kickoff to their 60th anniversary with a golf tournament. I was able to attend a portion of that. River Drive Park always has an amazing beef roast. The Little Einsteins, I know that it opened a few weeks ago and I was unable to attend their official opening, but they invited me to their barbecue event a couple weeks ago, and what an amazing facility that we have in this town. It's a great learning education facility. They call it a daycare and an education center. And they are telling me that they are attracting people from as far away as north of Barrie to have their children at this facility as they work in the area or they're passing through. And I can certainly see why when you walk in, how attractive it is and why people will want to have their children there during the day. Last week, the Youth and Community Initiatives Fund presented checks to a number of groups and organizations and schools. This is the fund that is raised through the mayor and council golf tournament. There was more than $30,000 awarded to a variety of groups, some kind of large and some very small. And I feel that it will make a huge difference, and particularly in the smaller ones. Our next golf tournament is September the 10th, just around the corner next week. So we're looking forward to that. We've now depleted the bank account and we're looking to fill it back up next week. So I think everybody here are going, both on this side and on this side, many. So thank you. I had the opportunity to attend a roundtable with the Honourable Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, Elizabeth Dowswell, who was here a couple of years ago, and with the Honourable Miriam Monsaf and Women's Mayors of Ontario. There were 20 of us invited to go to Queen's Park last week, and I'm going to write a little report up a little later on kinds of things that are happening around the province, women in politics, and the kinds of suggestions that came out of that day and roundtable to see if we can mentor more young women to get involved. We have some coming events. Sharon Temple has the illumination. That's already been mentioned. Golf tournament has been mentioned. We have on September the 11th our zoning bylaw community open house, and September 13th and 14th the Magna Hoedown is taking place. And while we don't host it, we have community groups that benefit because of it. So if you can get out, if you have some time and you can volunteer, that's even better. I know they're still looking for volunteers. So with that, I believe we're finished our community announcements. Item D is presentations, and I don't believe we have any presentations at this time, but we do have a deputation. And Mr. Clerk, could you introduce our deputant, please?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, we have Seema Allahdini, Public Educator Women's Support Network of York Region, making a deputation to committee regarding the work of the Women's Support Network of York Region.
Welcome, Sina. Good to have you with us today.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, Honorable Mayor, Council members, and community members. My name is Seema Allahdini, and I'm happy to be here on behalf of the Women's Support Network of York Region. The Women's Support Network, or WSN, was established in Newmarket in 1992 as a nonprofit registered charity. WSN is York Region's only sexual violence crisis center. Overall, our work is split into 3 portfolios: sexual violence, commercial sex trafficking, and prevention work through public education. Today, I would like to spend some time discussing the prevalence of sexual violence in our community and the work that we do at WSN to both eradicate sexual violence and to support survivors. So when we talk about sexual violence and sex trafficking, what exactly do we mean? Sexual violence is a broad term that describes any violence, whether it's physical or psychological, that violates the sexual integrity of a person or targets their sexuality. This can include unwanted touching, sexual assault, rape, sexual harassment, online sexual harassment, childhood sexual abuse, stalking, and much more. Sex trafficking is also a form of sexual violence, but falls under the broader term human trafficking. It involves the forced sexual exploitation of a person, which tends to target youth in our region. This looks much like anything else in the sex industry, however, without any element of consent, and can include work in escort services, massage parlors, strip clubs, phone sex lines, internet chat rooms, forced prostitution, among others. Sexual violence is prevalent in Canada and costs Canadians roughly $4.8 billion a year. It is estimated that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men will experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. Yet, it is one of the most underreported crimes in Canada, with only 33 out of 1,000 sexual assaults being reported to police. Despite the common misconception that perpetrators are strangers, we know that in 82% of sexual assaults, the person is actually known to the victim. WSN provides free, non-judgmental, and confidential services to people who have experienced any form of sexual violence at any point in their life. We provide services in English and French, and we are able to get language interpreters for those who are more comfortable in another language. We also provide transportation assistance so people can access our services with as few barriers as possible. In terms of supporting survivors, we have 2 24-hour year-round crisis lines. We offer a range of different counseling supports and group programs, and we provide additional supports based on client needs. Our counseling program is diverse and includes rapid response counseling for immediate needs, individual counseling, group counseling programs where funding allows, and walk-in counseling every Thursday evening for those who are exploring if counseling is a good fit for them. Our work towards ending sexual violence includes public education workshops and trainings, community outreach at festivals and events, advocacy and media relations to raise awareness and bust myths about sexual violence, and an annual march and rally in protest of sexual and gender-based violence called Take Back the Night. When looking at York Region, we know that 669 sexual assaults were reported to York Regional Police last year, which is up 6.4% from 2017 and up a staggering 64% from 2014. We would attribute this to more community awareness since the Me Too movement and thus more reporting. Last year alone, WSN answered almost 2,500 crisis calls. We provided counseling to 142 individuals. We delivered 95 group counseling sessions. We supported 51 individuals affected by commercial sexual exploitation. We presented to almost 3,000 people through public education workshops and trainings. And we distributed over 7,000 outreach materials across York Region. Our small but mighty team has been busy. If you are feeling outraged by sexual violence in your community and are moved to action, we would like to invite you to York Region's 21st annual Take Back the Night event. On Friday, September 20th, we will be marching down Yonge Street between Elgin Mills and Major Mac, followed by a vigil, empowering speakers, and live entertainment at the Richmond Hill United Church. We'd love to see you come out and support the fight for human rights. Honorable Mayor, council members, community members, thank you so much for sharing your time with me today, and please do not hesitate to contact us for anything. We are also available on all social media and through our website at womenssupportnetwork.ca. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sina. That's a very powerful presentation. Appreciate that very much. Members of council, do you have any questions of our deputant? I'm quite sure we'll think about some afterwards. We know how to be in touch with you, and just so people are aware, this is a Newmarket based on Harry Walker Parkway, just north of Davis Drive. Their offices are very accessible, and their meeting areas are very warm and welcoming. If you have an opportunity to pop in, you can really see how you do make a difference with people's lives, and we appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. I have a motion to receive, please. Councillor Roy-DiClemente, all those in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Clerk, I do not have any other deputants at this time. Are there any others that I've missed?
That is correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We will move to item F, and that's Development Services with Councillor Crone in the chair. You may stay if you would like to, but don't feel that you have to. You can slide out at any time. We're going to move into department business, several. So thank you. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have two items on the agenda today. First item is Development Services Planning Branch Report, request for removal from the Register of Cultural Heritage Properties, 20157 Leslie Street, Queensville. Mr. Ramuno, do you have any comments on this?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this first item, it is a request for a removal from our Register of Cultural Heritage Properties. The matter was brought forward to our Heritage Advisory Committee a number of months ago with the recommendation for the property to be removed from our registrar. The committee also made a decision to add a couple of additional conditions with respect to this removal, one being a financial contribution be made by the owner, and as well as a installation of a plaque recognizing the past history associated with the property.
Thank you very much. Could I have a mover for this? Moved by Councillor Persechini, Do we have any questions from committee? Mayor Hackson?
Not a question, more of a comment. We are seeing more and more of these heritage homes, and when you start talking about the 1800s, certainly at some point that house should have had more attention, and we should have been able to keep it. At this point, it's way beyond what it should be, and I guess that's what you call demolition by neglect. So I'm just wondering, and we're not going to solve this all today, but the more I think about, there are other homes that are out there, some that people are living in, but perhaps are, as I quite often say, in the sights of bulldozers. How do we achieve what we want to with our heritage properties before we get to this point on a regular basis? And I know that you've had experience in other municipalities. It's too late for this one, but are there others that we can have some teeth in, some policies that we have here to make sure that they don't get to this level?
Certainly, through you, Madam Mayor. I mean, it's a good question. It's always a challenge dealing with, properties that perhaps are, experiencing some neglect. The goal is always to try and preserve some of these properties. I think our first step is now with the retention of our consultant to assist in the review of our heritage property. So we've already had our kickoff meeting. We're going to bring them forward to one of our open houses, I believe, in October, just to meet with the general public and explain what what they're tasked with respect to going through our list. And once we evaluate our list, I think moving forward, we'll have to do a better job in maybe being vigilant with some of these properties that remain on our list that we think warrant have some significance to just through property standards, and just have discussions earlier on with those property owners, making sure that the properties are maintained, especially if they're vacant for a period of time.
Thank you. Councillor Morton, you had a question as well, then Councillor Roy-DiClemente.
Through you to Mr. Ramuno. When I look at the photographs of the inside of this house, at some point it obviously was a beautiful house, and there are things in there that I think could have been saved. Is there any way that the town, before we tear it down, can store some of the stuff that may have some history? I mean, I have driven by this house for years and thought, what a nice house it must have been when someone really looked after it and tender, loving care. And it gets to this point. But I mean, there's a door in one of these photos that I'm sure somebody else could use. And when we talked the other day, I was trying to come up with some place that maybe we could send some of this stuff if we didn't have any place to store it. And that is through the Restore, because a lot of people take things there and a lot of people buy things from there. So maybe it's something that we could partner somehow with them and see if there's some way that we can save a little bit of history.
Mr. Ramuno, did you have a comment? Or?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. I think what we need to do is, and I'll bring forward a report at a future date with respect to perhaps trying to establish a town salvage program, whereby we may be able to retain some of the some pieces from some of these homes. We'll need to find a location. But that's something that I'll report back on at a later date. With respect to this home, I haven't been in it, but I know staff and members of the Heritage Committee have been in it. It suffered serious water damage, and even some of the doors and the trim pieces have experienced water damage, and they've warped. So I doubt very much there's anything within this home that we're able to salvage, but we will reach out one more time to the owners before they demolish it. If there is anything worthwhile, we'll make note of it and see what we can do with it. But I will report back to council on trying to initiate a salvage program.
Thank you. Councillor Roy-DiClemente, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, I guess, work off of Mayor Hackson and Councillor Morton said. This again highlights how much of a pressing need we have to identify and protect the properties that are on our list. Quite frankly, I'll be polite when I say that it's unfortunate that this was let to go, particularly given that this property owner quite honestly knows better. And at this point, it's starting to feel like it's deliberate, and that's really unfortunate. While the door may or may not be salvageable, I know that there's another picture of a beautiful hinge here as well that could potentially be saved. I think what I may suggest, Mr. Chair, is once we've dealt with this particular matter, is perhaps another motion further to what Councillor Morton has raised, is that giving direction to staff. And Mr. Rumuno said he's going to report back, but let's make that a little bit more formal and express a need to explore what a salvage program might look like, should we be in a position to do that. And as well to address the fact that we've got to put some teeth into our property standards with the listed properties while we work through this process with our consultant. This is a really sad situation, and it didn't need to be like this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or comments? See none, can I call for a vote then? All in favor? Any opposed? See none, motion is carried. Okay, so, Councillor Roy-DiClemente, I'll let you make your motion
Thank you,
to what you
Mr.
just
Chair.
spoke of.
Yeah, I don't have it prepared, but I think that what I'd like to do is put a motion on the floor that we direct staff to explore a salvage program, a heritage salvage program, and report back, and that we give direction to staff to have regard for property standards matters regarding our heritage listed properties.
Mr. Clerk, were you able to capture that?
We have most of the intent, yes.
Okay, so we have that moved by Councillor Roy-DiClemente. Any questions? Okay, let's call for a vote. All in favor? None opposed? Motion is carried. Well done. Okay, next item on the list, on the agenda here, is the proposed telecommunications tower in the Township of King, Rogers Communication Inc., 18340 Bathurst Street. Mr. Rumuno, would you like to comment on this?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is really a memo for council's information. We were circulated an application from the Township of King. There's a cell provider who wants to install a tower, telecommunication tower, within the Township of King, west side of Bathurst. And under the telecommunication protocol, the provider has to hold a public meeting and circulate notice of the proposed tower. We've suggested to the Township of King that they expand their circulation notice to include residents in the town of East Gwillimbury. So they've agreed to expand their circulation notice from their 250 meter radius standard to 800 meters, so that we can capture the western portion of the Harvest Hill community. The proposed tower is located, as I said, just west side of Bathurst, about 80, I believe it's 80 meters north of Miller's Side Road. So the next step is they'll carry out their notification. They'll schedule a public meeting back in or sometime in October, and then they'll have to take those comments and address those comments and report back to the Township of King Council.
Thank you. Can I have a mover for this motion? Moved by Councillor Foster. Are there any questions? Mayor Hackson.
I guess just a comment for me. I know that we have seen this before, that other municipalities come very close to our residents, and yet it's in a different municipality. I'm hoping that this is going to change the service that we have in that portion of our municipality in particular. I don't know about anyone else, but dropped calls within that area. And I'm hoping that we can have some staff out to that meeting, or one staff member, just to make sure that we understand exactly what they're doing. The design of it looks like a tree, which is very different. And I actually saw one of these on Highway 400 north in cottage country this weekend that is installed and operating. I'm assuming operating, and it didn't stick out too much. I recognized it, but it didn't. It was definitely a cell tower, but it looked like a tree. So at least they're starting to have a look at those kinds of features as well. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Certainly, I'd like to commend staff for reaching out to our friends in King Township for working with them, and I appreciate their cooperation in letting our folks, our residents, know about what was going on. I think that's always helpful to keep the public informed. So with that, I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor? None opposed? Motion is carried. That's it for items on the agenda. Mr. Ramuno, do you have anything else to add?
No, nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Members of committee, do you have anything you'd like to ask Mr. Ramuno? Seeing none, I pass the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. In the absence of Councillor Carruthers, I will chair the portion of Community Infrastructure and Environmental Service. She has given notice of her absence today. And item number 1 is the Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services Memo train whistle cessation for railway crossings in the town of East Queensville. There are any comments from staff at this time? Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. The memo is put together for information for council. It's based on a request that was made from the public to cease whistling from the GO trains operating through the town. Staff reviewed the request and previous council resolutions regarding train whistling back in 2011. Council agreed not to implement whistling, an anti-whistling bylaw at that time. Staff have further reviewed the issue, consulted with legal regarding insurance premiums related to anti-whistling. Our insurance provider is saying that there would be no increase to our premiums. However, staff feel that council's decision at the time should remain, and we should not implement an anti-whistling bylaw given the capital pressures it would put on the town to make improvements at all the crossings to support an anti-whistling bylaw.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would be interested to know if the individuals in our community knew that the train tracks were there when they purchased their property. I mean, we have 2 of them in Mount Albert. We hear them. You know, you hear them starting to blow as they're coming. Well, Scott, you would know. And then you just sort of go back to sleep, and it's just kind of there, and you don't hear it anymore. And I know previously we have discussed this many times over the last few years, and I just can't support putting out this amount of money for a necessity where people could. We've had 2 people in the Mount Albert area that have over the years lost their life on the tracks, and I'm afraid that I would not be in favor of moving ahead with this decision.
Thank you. Councillor Persechini.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. that's my opportunity clock in the morning because I usually get up at that time, starts up, and I get up. I don't have to worry about it. My opportunity to stand up and listen to that makes me right up. And I said, thank you very much. That's my clock for me. Thank you. So I echo what Councillor Morton says. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question: are we making? Is there any distinction between freight trains and passenger trains with this? This is it the crossing itself that is the driver for the whistles. I just want to know if there was any distinction. Will we have complete silence?
Through Madam Chair to Councillor Crone. There's no distinction between freight trains and passenger trains. They're all required to whistle when crossing municipal roads.
And if I may, I'm just curious if what the input has been from the residents. I know certainly as a councillor, if people aren't happy with something, they will be quick to tell you. And so you hear, the odd resident that says they don't like the whistles. Although I am by no means scientific, I've watched certain Facebook groups where the question has been posed, and I've been quite surprised at how many people will defend the train whistles. It's actually, for me, it's shocking because I would have thought, intuitively, I would have thought more people were against the whistles. But if an informal poll on Facebook, certainly people, the trains were here before, before you were. It's been part of life, as we know it. You'll get used to it, and that seems to be the overwhelming opinion. I was just curious if staff have heard anything, if residents have written in, or this formed any part of your research on that. I'm just curious.
Through Madam Chair to Councillor Crone. We haven't noticed. Beyond that, the people asking for the anti-whistling bylaw are the same people generally asking every so often.
My one last comment as a recovering insurance guy, I can tell you. You mentioned in your memo that yes, there would be no charge in premium. That's when your record is clean. Of course, after your first accident, the insurance company, the carrier, will make a decision. And the underwriters will look at it and say, "Is this a risk we want to continue with?" And they will weigh whether or not to keep us as a client or raise our rates. If there's a second accident, those decisions get easier and easier for the insurance company. So we do need to exercise a fair bit of caution with this. It could put us in a precarious position where suddenly we may have any accidents by the train excluded. We might be able to hang on to the coverage, but any accidents from that would be excluded from their offering, which means that we assume 100% of the liability. And I think as stewards of the tax dollars, we need to be very cognizant of that. That's all for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions, comments? Just wonder under the resolution if we should be including that we reply back to the resident that had requested. I'm assuming there was one, but perhaps.
There was one in this instance.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a mover and a second. Sorry, just a mover. Councillor Persechini. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Next item is a joint community infrastructure and environmental services and emergency and community safety services memo regarding traffic and parking bylaw review, public consultation results.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah. So this memo is a follow-up to our previous one, and we are telling you the results of our public consultation regarding changes that we are looking into making to the parking portion of the anticipated consolidated traffic and parking bylaw. And I'm happy to take any questions on it. I also have Jennifer Nichols here, who conducted the survey, and she'd be happy to answer any questions you may have as well.
Thank you. Questions, members of committee? Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to, I guess, Jennifer, have we considered actually, say, especially during winter months, alternating parking cars on either side of the road? I know they do this in Toronto, and we used to go down there to visit family a few years ago when they lived down there. And one time we would visit, we'd be on the right side of the road, and the next time we went down, we had to park on the left side, or on the alternate side. And so it seemed to work out. The residents that lived down there were quite used to it, and there was no problem. And the trucks in the snow and that at wintertime would go down one side, and then they would do the opposite side at a different time when the cars were switched. So is it something that we can at least think about, look into?
Yeah, through the chair, that's certainly something we can look at. It may be a logistic item in regards to snow removal. I don't know how that would work for the department for that, but it's certainly something we can look to.
Go ahead.
Through Madam Chair, to Councillor Morton. In the Toronto example, typically the alternating sides of parking is associated with those residences that don't have driveways to park into. Their only source of parking is on street due to the intense or dense residential buildings where they're literally typically like townhouse type or row housing or high population areas where they don't have driveways.
Just further to that, the relative that we did visit lived on a street where they did have garages in the back, and they could go in if they had to, or it was the other neighbors that weren't able to use the parking, or if they had more than one car, then they were able to do that as well. So I think it's something that maybe we can take a look at and see if it would work. Maybe not in every area in East Gwillimbury, but certainly in some of them. Yes.
Councillor Persechini.
Yes, when I was living in Marchmount and Ossiton and Davenport, they had the same scenario, and it worked quite well. I had only one garage, but we had 3 cars in our family, so we had to park in the street, and it just kind of rotated and worked out very well. So I don't know, maybe we should do a pilot project to look into it. That's my suggestion. Thanks.
Councillor Roy-DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know we've been trying to deal with this. We've been struggling with this issue for basically as long as I've been on council, and probably even longer. I feel like the results from this, really the only real conclusive result here was that folks did not feel that we should be allowing commercial vehicles in residential zones. But other than that, the results were pretty evenly split across all sorts of different options. I feel like we're not going to be able to please everybody, and that shows up here in these results. And I think this is the second time we've done a survey of this sort where we've tried, we've asked, and it's been inconclusive. I think at this point, instead of trying another pilot project, I think we should be, as staff who are our subject matter experts, have them, as they say in the last few lines of their memorandum to us, that they're bringing a report to us to consolidate our traffic and parking bylaws based on their expertise and the work that they've already done pretty consistently to try and address this once and for all. Obviously, we don't have this. We have similar issues, but not identical issues to other more urbanized areas. But generally, pretty much everybody in East Gwillimbury has a garage and a driveway and a place to put vehicle. So, this is for extra, this is for guests, this is for overnight, and we're trying to address that. And I think this is one option, and we should try it. Thank you.
Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Certainly, I think we're going to be struggling with this for years to come as well. My sympathy certainly lie with the residents. It's a tough spot they're in. I hear about it as a ward councillor. I know we have challenges in Mount Albert where public transit isn't as great as it could be, and we worry about threats to minimize it. I think there's, I would love to look at other options that are out there. I remember reading a few weeks ago, and I think I shared it with some members of staff, that there's an app. Seems like there's an app for everything. Well, there was some smart person came up with an idea of an app of sharing parking spaces. So you might have a resident that doesn't need a car. So they could share their parking space. I think we need to look outside the box and try and figure out other ways to solve this problem. I think certainly as we go forward in our planning, we need to make sure that we're accommodating as much parking as we can and having space for guests and whatnot. My last comment, though, is I would love to see a fifth question on the survey. And that question would be, do you use your garage for your car? Because I will guarantee you, I know when knocking on doors during the campaign, those garages are filled with boxes. And so there's an opportunity for the resident to make use of the space that's intended for parking. So I don't say that to be lecturing, but I think it's an opportunity that, we all have to share in this problem. Okay, that's my rant for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that our public are not all going to be satisfied with this, and I do not envy your job. You've done a terrific job in putting this together and trying to find some middle ground for us to present to our public. But unfortunately, parking is something that most of our public have an opinion on, and some are experts in that regard. So I think we need to move forward. We've been toying with this for quite some time. I suspect that this is going to be fluid, that we get started and then assess it at a certain point and decide, did we hit the mark, did we not? I guess the only concern that I would have, excuse me, is that we had 64 participants in the survey, which doesn't seem like a lot to me. I probably have had more than 64 emails of people complaining about parking on the road and whatever. And I'm sure you had more than 64 tickets for parking that people received in the last period of time. So it seems like a small sample for a large group. I appreciate the survey chart. I think that really spells it out. And as Councillor Roy-DiClemente said, there's really one that it's just that commercial vehicles quite strongly, people do not want them in residential areas. I would have thought it might have even been greater than. So I think at this time we continue to gather information, as I think you always do anyway, but we should be moving forward and establishing some type of a parking policy. It's not going to get any better. We know today that there's houses being built that have driveways that won't hold one car, and the garage is full of stuff. So we will continue to have people who have moved here from other places, and there's less leniency in parking on the road, and we are going to have to be vigilant with those to make sure that it complies with our policy in the long term. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Persechini. Any other questions, comments? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate the work that you've done on this one. That completes the two reports for Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services. Are there any other items to be brought forward in this area at this time?
No other items at this time.
Thank you. Anyone from members of committee? Seeing none, we are at item H, and I will turn the chair to Councillor Persechini this time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two items. The first item is the Community Parks, Recreation and Culture Report, CPRC 2019-21, East Gwillimbury Tennis Update. General Manager Carmerson, do you have any comments on this?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This report provides information on our growth plans for tennis, consistent with our Health and Active Living Master Plan, by close to doubling our court inventory over the next 2 years, with 5 new tennis courts coming to East Gwillimbury over the next 2 years. The report also provides information on our partnership with the EG Tennis Club, which provides tennis instruction programs, partnership camps with the town for well over 150 EG residents of all ages. Additionally, staff are working with the club on a fair market fee strategy to assist with operating cost. The report also summarizes a response and comments to concerns communicated to staff and council by a resident. It should be noted that in addition to this report, staff have personally reached out to the resident and communicated this information that's in the report, as well as provided the report and the timing for the report that is presented to council. Be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much, General Manager. Could I have a mover, please? Okay, moved by Councillor Morton. Any questions, the committees? Okay, Councillor Morton.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to oh, excuse me, to Aaron. Aaron, I read this with interest, and I realized that there are so many, or there are quite a few new tennis courts being built in East Gwillimbury, and it's wonderful to see. And I'm sure that over the next few years, we'll be building a lot more. But I was wondering if the revitalization of the community center and the park in Mac, if we have a place there that used to be a tennis court, and I understand that probably we're going to be using it in the wintertime for skating, which is great. But is there an opportunity for us to perhaps utilize that area in the summer as a tennis court?
General Manager, can you answer that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have noted that, and I thank Councillor Morton for the suggestion and option. Absolutely, that sports court could be planned with flexible uses. It's a multi-use sports court, so that could be an additional option for staff and town residents.
Thank you. Was moved by Councillor Morton. Any other questions? Councillor Roy-DiClemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for me, I sort of highlighted the chart on page 3 of the report that kind of gives us the breakdown at the Holland Landing Community Center, and there's a couple of spots where there are no courts available. And while it's somewhat alarming, I think that this is really just for me anyway, it's a temporary issue, given that we've got additional courts coming online and the facility at Queensville that should be able to accommodate the club more appropriately going forward. And I would hope that the club, while I realize they want to try and keep a lot of their games in the same place, that they would start to utilize other facilities across town and not just focus on one area, which then triggers the sorts of comments that we receive from residents. Again, as I said, it's a temporary, it's a bit of a growing pain, and for me, I'm looking forward to having the club contribute a reasonable amount of money towards the upkeep of the courts and so on, especially given that a third of their members are not residents. So I'd like to see some of their discretionary funds helping to support our facility. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. General Manager Comerson? Any comments on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've noted those comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other? Oh, Mayor Hackson?
Thank you. Thank you for this thorough report. I know that the tennis club has been part of our history for, I think, since we first got a tennis court. It's been quite a long time, and they do provide a very high level instruction that we've not been able to do as a recreation department. So I think they should be credited for that for sure. And I would imagine as time goes on, listening to the news first thing this morning, we have another tennis player from the GTA that is moving into some very high level competition. And I suspect that that will be a trend that we will see a lot of people wanting to move back into tennis. It seems like the wave is much greater now than it was before. So congratulations on having the new tennis courts in our long-term plan and even short-term that I think we should be able to handle both fairly easily.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment that there are going to be a lot more tennis courts, and I think this will kind of all balance each other out, and we won't have some of the problems that we might have in the past. See, there's any other questions from a members committee? There isn't. We'll have a vote. All in favor? Opposed? None? Okay. Next item, Community Parks, Recs, and Cultures Report, CPRC 2019-25, ice permit fees. General Manager Comerson, any comments or any reports?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report seeks council direction on an implementation strategy for ice permit fees over the next 3 years. The fee strategy includes extensive review of fees in surrounding municipalities for fair market pricing, as well as extensive public consultation with our ice users and our valued stakeholders, in particular minor hockey and our East Gwillimbury Skating Club. Be happy to answer any questions related to the report.
Thank you very much. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Morton. Any questions on a member of the committees? Mayor?
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I certainly understand the need to do a scan on a regular basis for permit fees, as we do with all of our recreation opportunities. But I am concerned that we always have that risk of finding a piercing point for a family. This is going to be passed on to the users of the ice, whether it's figure skating or hockey or rentals of adult groups. And I'm concerned it probably isn't a problem for one child in a family, but when you start to get a couple and you get equipment and whatever, I really would hope that we don't push it to a point that there are young families that cannot afford these costs for hockey or for figure skating for that matter. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to have a look at some of our rental groups that may have more ability to increase their rental fees. I know that there are some commercial rentals that actually have skating lessons and clinics and those kinds of things that it is a for profit for someone, and perhaps those could go up just a little bit higher and be a little softer with both minor hockey and figure skating. And I may be wrong. Are there any other young youth users other than minor hockey and figure skating?
General Manager?
Through you, Madam Mayor, or sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, to Madam Mayor, the majority of the ice time that is utilized for youth children is through minor hockey and the skating club. We have yet to see some of the more specialized groups like speed skating or sledge hockey come into play, but over time and as we grow, those are two emerging sports for children and youth that we may see over time. Related to fair market pricing, we're always very sensitive with regards to pricing and proposing recommended pricing and working with our user groups to ensure the pricing threshold ensures sustainability for those groups to continue to grow the sport with, especially with families with multiple players or skaters in the family. In addition to that, we have proposed to council two additional fee categories for non-residents. So that would be an increased amount for our non-resident ICE users, as well as a for-profit rate for those groups that are running for-profit hockey and skating programs that are making a profit, and similar to other municipalities, a for-profit rate does generate revenue and does offset costs and is a fair market price for those groups that are a for-profit endeavor.
Thank you.
Just one other, if I might,
Sure.
Mr. Chair. The proposal is to have it implemented January 2020. And while that's the beginning of our budget year, that's halfway through a hockey season or a figure skating season. And I'm wondering if we could align it with the season of the, I'm thinking particular those two groups. I suspect that they've probably already started registrations now. And their registration will run until March.
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. We have worked with the groups, and if it is the direction and wish of council, we could adjust that to the fall start, September 2020, for the fall 2020 ice season. We were working with finance to bring the fees in line with our annual budget. However, we do have the flexibility to adjust that to the fall ice season, which commences in September 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Roy-DiClemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand and support the concern about pricing ourselves out of the market. However, the proposed chart shows us that even with the adjusted fees, we're still the lowest in two categories across the region and the second lowest in two others. And so even though we are increasing our fees, we're still maintaining a very cost-effective fee schedule for our user groups, whether they're residents or prime time or part of our preferred user groups being the skating and the minor hockey. We have also instituted a couple of initiatives with the Fair EG, with our Youth and Community Initiatives Fund. There are resources available to people who who need some assistance, and then there is a great deal of discretion. I know that minor hockey has, I'm not mistaken, they also have a representative on our Youth and Community Initiatives Fund on the committee itself. So I also know that we've been talking about this for years. These reports that are being referenced are from 3 years and more, and these discussions with hockey and with skating have been ongoing for years. So this shouldn't be coming as a surprise to them, whether it happens in January or whether it happens next spring. It shouldn't be a shock to them. I know we've been having these conversations with them for years. We certainly were when I was chair, and for me, the expert reports, in particular the Allman report, talked about how there was an ability to pay within our community, and that it was okay for us to raise our rates, and this is a modest phased approach. So it's not. It shouldn't be too much of a jolt as far as I sit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, I think it's, I would certainly support the notion that we we delay the increase in funding to the fall. I think we needed to let our community groups, give them fair warning about the price change, so that they can factor that into their own pricing. But my question is, have we ever done an analysis to look at how much it costs us to operate a rink for an hour? What I'm getting at is, are we making money? Are we losing money? Sorry to sound like a business guy, but I certainly wouldn't want to be gouging the public, making buckets of cash off of them. On the other end, I don't want to be losing our shirt either. So I was just curious if and I know it's a tricky thing to do with public buildings, but we have staff and it has to be cared for. And I was just curious if anything like that's been done in the past. Thank you.
General Manager, Congressman? Or Mr. Webster?
Actually, it's a good question, and we do have an answer. We did look into that several years ago. I think it actually predated Mr. Karmazin. Wes Jarvis, who's a local proprietor, played in the NHL, runs a facility out of Newmarket called NTR. And Wes always keeps a close eye on us because the fact of the matter is ice hours are subsidized, as are a lot of other programs offered by the municipality, and that's one of the things we do as a municipal organization. The level of subsidy, you could look at private rinks in the GTA area. I think some of them for prime hours now are in the $300 plus per hour when you're starting to look at a for-profit venture. And I know Wes has a close eye on us. We could certainly look at his, for a smaller rink, his cost structure, which he uses, which I think is a little more than ours, clearly, but I think as part of our 2020 budget process, we could take a look at this, and depending on how ambitious Treasurer Valchich and General Manager Karmazin, we could take a look at community halls, sports fields, and others as well, because the large majority of those all would involve some sort of tax subsidy for the larger benefit of users.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have a comment. I think cost and recovery, as we always talked about, is very important. Is if you're running a company or any other business, then we should run the town the same way as we run a company in a certain way. You have some leeways, but it's very, very important to cost and recovery. And if all of a sudden we do like Mississauga, and the taxes weren't paying taxes for all those years, and all of a sudden you got to go crazy. So if you do it in stages, I have no problems as long as we do fairly. And if there's more 2 to 3 or 4 people in the family, maybe I'm sure General Manager comments on, we do give discounts to if there's more than one person in the family. I'm not sure, but maybe we should look at that. If there's a burden of 4 kids or 3 kids, and we should give a little, or it doesn't go up for them, but the first person, it goes up. Just a suggestion. So that's how my suggestion on this thing. Any other further questions before I call a vote? Madam Mayor?
Thank you. I would like to put on the floor that the fees be changed in for January as opposed to in passing this, and that gives particularly the 2 organizations a chance to get their ducks in a row, particularly if they're already doing registration now.
Mr. Webster?
So I think the clarification here is that we run on an annual cycle of January to December, and the sports organizations, the 2 primary users, run on a more September to May. So this was proposing, I believe, from talking to General Manager Karmazin, that we would implement it in January. I think council direction may be, if they wanted to defer it, would be to change it to the full season. So we would, generally in hockey, the season would be called the 1920 season. So it would be implementation for the 2021 season, which would mean essentially that you're putting the organizations on notice for sort of a late August, September implementation of 2020 at the new rates. There would be a revenue impact, though, and I think that in that maybe we have factored that into the equation for that. So there would be a nominal, I might ask either General Manager Karmazin or Velchich to speak to, but the deferral of that might be in a totality.
Thank you, Ms. Webster. Mr. Valchek or General Manager?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've accounted for approximately $20,000 in revenue for the increase for 2020. In essence, if you start your ice season rate increases in September of 2020 for the 2021 season, as CIO Webster indicated, you'd approximately half that amount. So we would simply adjust the budget for a $10,000 increase, not a $20,000 increase.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Roy-DiClemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if I might suggest that we, instead of making this a wholesale shove into the next fiscal year, town's fiscal year, that perhaps what we could do, and I believe a lot of these ice lots have already been booked and permitted. I know there's games starting this week. So I wonder if we might simply say that we would implement this schedule for January, and that new permits, i.e. the new bookings that are coming in, so those commercial operations who need ice, that they would be subject to the new rate schedule. And so that would mitigate some of that revenue impact. It's a modest revenue impact. I think we can accommodate it, given that we've been operating under a lower revenue stream to begin with. So I'm fine either way, but I'm just wondering if we could simply put some wording in that it would be new bookings, because all of the other ice has already been established. It's been done. And so those fees for this year for those groups are already set because they've booked the permits.
So
That's how I'd look at it.
Thank you. So do I have a motion from the mayor that this be postponed until the next budget? We got that note? All in favor of that? Oops, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have a motion presented by Councillor Morton as per the report. And we have heard here suggested amendments by Mayor Hackson for one particular course to delay the rate increases to the 2021 season, as Mr. Webster had indicated. And then I've also heard a friendly amendment by Councillor Roy-DiClemente to implement the rate increases for the January 2020 only for new ice schedulings. So we can deal with the amendments formally. So Mayor Hackson has moved that the resolution be to add that the rate increase be deferred to EG Minor Hockey Association to the 2021 season.
Madam Mayor?
I would agree to alter that to new permits.
Councillor Foster.
Mr. Karmazin, hasn't this already been done? I've already been given my ice permit. I've already paid my first couple of payments of equal payments that are going to go all the way through. So I'm not going to see the increase until September 2020. Isn't that already the way you've done your bookings?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be correct. So on a go-forward basis, we would be looking at all new ice allocated through our ice allocation process for 2019. Any available ice booked after January into the new year would be at the new rates. So a simple amendment to commence in September of 2020, I think would be suffice. With my recommendation back to council.
Thank you. Do we now have a vote on that first? The amendment and the changes? All in favor? Oops, still.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Mayor Hackson, you initially changed your formal amendment do you want to formally have that amendment back to the September 2020 deferral?
I have changed it, so it would only be for new permits for anything following January 20.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that's what Mr. Carmazin has confirmed, that any new schedulings for January 2020 will be at the new rate. His recommendation was if you wanted to defer to September 2020, it was all fine. So you're sticking to that. And I believe Councillor Roy-DiClemente, your deferral or your amendment was in the same order with regards to new schedules for 2020. So Mr. Chair, the amending motion is to add an additional clause that the new rates be subject to only new schedules start commencing in January 2020.
Okay, so can we have a vote on all this? All in favor? Opposed? Now, can we have a vote on receiving this document? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, the general manager, do you have anything to add? Oh, this is a complicated situation here.
Through Mr. Chair, nothing further. Thank you.
Back to you, Madam Mayor. That's it from me.
Thank you very much. We are now at Corporate Services with Councillor Morton in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our first item on the agenda is has to do with the memo for the zoning bylaw public open house background. Mr. Valchich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the memo highlights, Council is looking to consider its updated comprehensive zoning bylaw on September 17th at the evening meeting. And as the memo indicates, in July, Committee of the Whole did pass a resolution requesting staff to set up an information and education session on September 11th, really to provide an opportunity. The memo highlights, I would call it a kind of a flexible schedule that starts with kind of an opportunity for informal dialogue, information booths to be set up by the town staff as well as conservation authority staff, as the zoning bylaw has had a lot of conversation and a lot of interest in the mandate and how things are done at the authority by members of our community. And so the idea is to have the conservation authority staff there. They've confirmed they will be there on the 11th to talk with individuals or groups that wish to have dialogue and ask some questions or find out about their mandate, how they do things, and so on. And the evening is also scheduled to have a bit of a formal portion to it where there'd be some information style presentations done by both town staff and conservation authority staff, and then followed by then a subsequent further informal dialogue opportunity again, so that there's lots of opportunity for folks to converse. And the evening spans a few hours, which is intended to give community members the opportunity to drop in when it's convenient for them. And because there's an informal dialogue session at the beginning and at the end of that session, there's no requirement to be there at a set time or you're going to miss out on the opportunity to learn and to communicate and ask questions and share perspectives. So that's how it's set up, and we have provided a little bit of an outline in there of what that might look like. And just wanted to point out, although it's in here, but I think it's important just for the public record, that there's also been conversation with provincial representatives to indicate that they'd certainly be most welcome if they're able to attend as well. And that might be beneficial if they can do so, although we've not heard, to the best of my knowledge, confirmation of attendance yet, but we're continuing to extend that invitation to make sure that if they can be there, that they're there as well to listen and to participate in some of that dialogue that'll take place. So that's just a little bit of a
an interpretation of the memo that you've got before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valchich. Can I get a motion to move on this? Councillors Crone. Any comments for Mr. Valchich on this memo? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the memo? Motion's carried. Okay, our next item is a memo for the Town Programs and Service Community Open House for October the 8th. Mr. Valchich?
Madam Chair, this is a memo just highlighting an overview of our second community open house. The first one we feel was very successful, well attended, and we got some great feedback. Gives community members an opportunity to come in and really in one stop shopping, get a chance to talk to a whole variety of folks from different departments, as well as some of our municipal partners about programs and services, and get lots of information, and again engage in dialogue as they find helpful. The one thing I'm quite excited about with this session coming up in early October is the fact that the East Gwillimbury Broadband Advisory Committee has also been engaged, and Councillor Crone is the liaison to that committee, and that committee will be there, as well as some York Region folks talking about the York Telecom network. And I think they've also extended invitations to some service providers, internet service providers, to give community members updated information about where we're at, and perhaps more importantly, where we're going in terms of improved internet service over time throughout EG. So I think that'll be a valuable addition to the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Valchich. Can I get a mover for this memo, please? Councillor Roy-DiClemente. Questions of Mr. Valchich on this? Mayor Hackson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if we have invited all of our community committees. I'm thinking about heritage. We've talked about heritage today, and environmental and accessibility. And I'm not sure whether there's a need at this time, but we all get questions about what are these committees doing and what's their mandate, and if there's an opportunity to have those volunteers come out and staff support them, I would assume. I'm just wondering if we've got some, but not all.
Mr. Valchich.
Madam Chair, I do know that certainly there has been dialogue with a number of representatives from council committees. However, with Ms. Hannah, I'm going to make sure that we formally extend at least an invite or have a conversation with the chairs of those respective committees to see whether there's something that they would be interested in participating in. I think it's a great idea. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Oh, sorry.
To you, Madam Chair, to Mayor Hackson. In past, we have invited our advisory committees through the clerk's office, and those committees were welcome to share our table and present any material. I think we've had the farmers market out at previous, and subsequent to that, if they're unable to attend, they can provide us any brochures or written material. And we do have the applications if somebody is interested in applying, and we also have the mandates if anybody's asking questions.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This comment would apply to this meeting and the previous item we were talking about, public information meeting. I would hope that we pull out all the stops to promote these meetings as much as we can to ensure that we have full public support and interaction. I think that's, look at all the different avenues, certainly our email, our Facebook, and I even know the street signs have proved to be quite successful when we open a park. We get a good turnout with that. So I would just encourage that we pull out all the stops to make sure that the public knows that we're having these meetings. I think they're very informative and very beneficial. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Mr. Valchich, do you have anything else to bring forward?
Madam Chair, just a couple of really important introductions, if I could.
Go ahead.
I'm delighted that we're joined today in the audience by Margot Bejean, who's our new Economic Development Manager. Margot comes to us. First of all, it was a very extensive recruitment process, and we were very fortunate to have Margot choose to join our team. She comes with a wealth of both private sector and public sector experience, and not only in economic development initiatives, job creation, employee attraction, but also a variety of sort of general corporate strategic initiatives that she's initiated and led. So we're very fortunate to have her on board. She just started yesterday and had an incredibly productive day already yesterday, having a tour of some of the important parts around EG as it relates to both, residential development, but more importantly, some of our areas of job creation and non-res development that Margot is going to be focusing on. She is going to be reaching out through the EA over the next few weeks to try and have an opportunity to meet with each of you one-on-one. And at that point, she'll be able to talk to you a little bit more about some of her background and experience, as well as garner some perspectives from yourselves in terms of where we're at with economic development, and more importantly, where you see us going, and some things for Margot to consider as she develops her initial plans for moving forward. And at this same time as well, I'd like to take the opportunity, although you've seen it in a written update previously, to just acknowledge Brittany Stevenson Byers and AJ Gove, who are both members of our customer service team. And we think we've got a very sort of creative approach where both of these individuals are going to be essentially sharing the role of economic development assistant and providing support to Margot, and a great learning opportunity for both of them. They're very enthusiastic. So we truly have a newly created team in front of you today, and we're really looking forward to seeing the synergy of that group and to see some exciting things as we move forward in that area. So that's just an update, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Valchich. I had the opportunity of meeting Margot yesterday, and I understand that she is a swimmer. So if anyone knows of a good place where she can swim, please pass it along. And congratulations to AJ and Brittany. So hearing nothing further, Madam Mayor, I turn the chair back to you.
Thank you very much. We are at Legal and Council Support Services with Councillor Foster in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one item on the agenda. It is a report from Legal and Council Support Services 2019-14 regarding the 2020 council meeting schedule. Mr. Horner, any comments?
Mr. Clerk has put this report together for you in terms of a proposed schedule for 2020, and we're very happy to receive your comments and reply and make any necessary changes and bring it back to you if required.
Thank you. Can I have a mover for this report? Councillor Morton. And we will now open up for questions from the committee. Mayor Hackson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if we looked at an opportunity to have one less summer meeting. I know we had talked about it previously, that there were many communities surrounding us that don't meet at all in the summer, and I certainly would not advocate for that. However, I'm wondering if we moved our July one a couple of weeks later, and one might be enough, with the proposal that, of course, the chair could always call a meeting in later in the season. I know that there are a number of municipalities that don't have meetings in the summer at all. There are some that have just one. A lot of organizations just have one, and it's I know it's difficult for staff to try and find a couple of weeks together to get away, and sometimes ourselves with the schedule of special events that are going on. It's just a comment. I don't know how staff feel about it.
Thank you, Mr. Webster.
Thank you, through the chair. We have talked about it at the senior management table, and I think sometimes you look at the current situation, and this year was a bit of an anomaly that the zoning bylaw matters really ate up a lot of time and continue to, and rightly so. I think the notion from the senior leadership group that would accommodate a meeting like that would allow us to populate that week potentially with other community events for elected officials and staff. It would free up some time for, there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes on report preparation, review, and agenda preparation minutes. So to focus on one, the thought that we were tabling at for council's consideration would be to have possibly the Tuesday before of the last week, the July week, the long weekend, having a full day, reserving 10, 3, and 7, and sort of having committee of the whole, possibly an extended committee of the whole or a workshop, an evening session if there's public engagement required, and giving that a potential shot for 2020. Bear in mind, the clerk has done some research. I believe there's 4 municipalities, if we just look at the York Region Confederation, 4 municipalities do not meet, including York Region, the largest government level. One jurisdiction has 1 meeting in early July, and so essentially covers that off till September. And 4 municipalities do continue with a normal schedule, including us. So it's something for consideration, and I think staff would be supportive. And bear in mind, if there were emerging issues or other matters that would require a council meeting, that there's always the ability for the head of council, being yourself, Madam Mayor, to call meetings as required on an as needed basis.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is maybe this should go back to staff and come back to us with a report on how that updated schedule would look. Am I going in the right direction here? Mr. Lamanna?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, the wouldn't be necessarily a report back. It's the proposed schedules in front of you. If council's wish is to try the 1 meeting per month, I think we looked into the future. On July, it would be July 28th, in accordance with Mr. Webster's suggestion, the last week of July. So we would just amend this proposed schedule to just simply include July 28th. And we'll fix the times. The times of the meetings, it's dependent on the types of meetings, but I think the intent is, as Mr. Webster's suggesting, that it's the entire day that's blocked off. So we can do a 10, 3, and a 7 just as placeholders, but I believe the intent and suggestion from Mr. Webster is that that whole day is blocked off, and in accordance, the entire week is sort of scheduled for any openings that park openings or what have you. So it would just be an amendment. I believe Councillor Morton has moved the resolution. It'd be received as amended, and that the schedule be amended accordingly.
Okay, does anybody need to see that on the screen? So we can work on getting that up on the screen. And in the meantime, Councillor Roy-DiClemente?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, the addition of July 28th would be instead of the July 14th and August 11th, or is it in addition to? So 1 less meeting, in other words. Thank you.
Councillor Persechini?
I guess this is good because people plan their holidays, and if you have the calendar and it's updated, then you can kind of work around it. So that would be very helpful once you get the new schedule. Mr. Clerk, we'll all probably get a new copy, right?
Mr. Lamont?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Once the council has ratified this report and recommendations, then clerk's office will populate the meeting requests accordingly.
Okay, so we have it up there with the amended change. Is everybody okay with that? Councillor Crone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I would throw this out for staff consideration. The 28th of July, the last week of July and the first week of August are typically the highest vacation weeks for folks. And I ask this more to you, with you and your staff. Would this impede with your meeting, knowing that staff could be reduced, public may be reduced, or not as accessible to this meeting? I just throw that out there for consideration. For me, if I know in advance when my meeting is, I schedule around it. But I'm just concerned that this may leave a short-handed staff side. If you're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it. So,
Mr. Webster?
I think by giving fair notice, folks will accommodate their planning around there to the greatest extent possible. And I think even this summer, I think we had almost full SMT attendance at both the scheduled meetings this year, and even today, the absence of one general manager is due to illness. And so I think it would give a lot of time for some quality planning.
Thank you. Anything further? So we can move to a vote on this. Kathy, you're good with that? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? See one, and that is carried. Anything further, Mr. Horner?
Nothing to add unless there are any questions. Oh, sorry, I see the clerk's hand up.
Mr. Lamont?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a verbal update and notification that the Active Trail Transportation and Trails Committee has a York Region representative, and that was previously Ms. Carner, who has resigned and stepped away. There is a replacement, Ms. Cumming, and she has submitted her application. We will provide that to the members through its due course. But the bylaw with regards to the active trails transportation doesn't speak to individual names. It speaks to a York Region representative. So Ms. Cumming is attending the meetings and is appointed just as such. And I'll provide you her details just for your information at the September 17th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. That's noted. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're at item K, and that's administration with myself and the chair. At this time, there are no reports. Mr. Webster, do you have any updates for us?
I do, Madam Mayor, just briefly, and there will be full memos coming to the next council. I just wanted to advise council or committee that we have had some meetings with York Region regarding growth management and the Upper York sewage system. So we will be bringing forward updates on those matters, primarily through the development services area. And secondly, I don't think it's been mentioned in public session yet, but the announcement from MPP Mulrooney's office regarding the re-engagement of the 404-400 link environmental assessment and design process. So we will find out a little more information on that. At this point in time, the only thing really has been a media not even a media release. It was just some statements made to the press. So we'll try to find out if there's a little more to that for next meeting. And thirdly, just to follow up on Mr. Valchich's comments regarding welcoming Margot Beijing as our new economic development manager. we are looking at some other municipal models which have moved that area into even more of a strategic area for municipalities and community outreach and engagement and business development. I think those all go hand in hand. So we'll be bringing forward some of those models for council's consideration. And as well, the other part of that is the transition of Amy Artinian, who has done a real admirable job for us in the past in economic development, to the human resources mandate. We're really trying to ramp up her attention and efforts with our employee and survey engagement, and we'll have more information on that initiative as well moving forward.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Webster? Seeing none, I will move on to item L. Perhaps we should have a motion to receive the information that we did have moved by Councillor Morton. All those in favor? That's carried. Item L is Emergency and Community Safety Services with Councillor Roy-DiClemente. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no prepared items on our agenda today. Chief, do you have anything to add at this time?
With thanks, nothing further.
Members of committee, anything you'd like to raise under this area? Councillor Morton.
Actually, it's more a thank you to the firefighters for the attendance at Dean's funeral last week. I was so proud of each and every one of them that came through and showed their concern and their appreciation for Dean serving for 32 years. So if you could pass that along to all of them, I would appreciate it.
They certainly had a presence. Noted, Mr. Chief. Anything else? Seeing none, I'll turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're under other business. Do we have any other business? We do. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just curious to ask the clerk, have we had any petitions presented? Are you in receipt of any petitions in the past, since we last met?
Sure, Madam Chair, no.
Thank you.
Councillor Roy-DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of things that I wanted to, I wasn't sure which area because it kind of crossed the enterprise, but we've had a couple of reports that have come to us that had been triggered by issues raised by residents. And so I wondered whether that we had a formal mechanism to advise those people who taken the time to advocate with us on matters. And today it was the train whistles and the tennis club. Sometimes it's other matters. But through that process of letting those residents know that their issue had been raised, had been addressed, that staff had researched, prepared a report, and that we had considered it, there doesn't seem to be a mechanism there to make sure that that happens. And I wanted to kind of raise that because it seems to cross all lines. It comes to us at council, it goes to staff. What's the mechanism to close the loop, particularly when it's a matter that ends up at a policy level and discussed at a level that, you know, we've put some considerable resources into it. We should be closing that loop. So I'm just wondering if we can ask staff to look at that, and if there's something that we can do to help with that, I'd be happy to do so. But I just wanted to see what we could do to close that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business? Seeing none, I have a motion to adjourn at 11:43 by Councillor Persechini. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. We're adjourned now until our